What will the future Starbucks look like? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business, and welcome to this week's episode of The Week in Restaurants. I'm joined this week by Executive Editor Lisa Jennings. This week, we talk about Starbucks and its plans for its future coffee shops, hint, more outlets. McDonald's is making an interesting change to its organization, hint, more chicken and beverages. And Noodles is changing its menu or updating it, hint, still Noodles. Later, Tech Editor Joe Guszkowski talks robots, and we preview a big upcoming series in restaurant business. Lisa, let's talk about Starbucks this week. They sort of hinted at some pretty big changes to their coffee shops after years and years of shifting to mobile order and takeout and delivery and drive-through and all that other nonsense. They are actually taking some steps to make life a little friendlier for people who want to hang out in their coffee shops. What do you think of this?
They want to be coffee shops again. I mean, personally, I think it's great because I think that is what people want. And, you know, Starbucks had become a little bit too, I don't know, unpeople friendly in a way. You know, what's just so funny about all of this is that they're going back to what it was, you know, and I love that I can put milk in my own coffee again. I mean, that to me is just makes such a big difference. And, you know, they're trying to make it a place where you want to go and sit and have a real cup of coffee, which would be, I think, a really smart idea. I mean, here in LA, Starbucks are work sites. I mean, you can walk into any Starbucks on any day and you've got, you know, people writing screenplays and, you know, doing all manner of business there, and they're crowded. But I just feel like it's great to see a return to making that environment more friendly to people in general and not having the line of people waiting for their digital order to go. I don't know. I think it's a good thing. I can't wait to see what they actually do, you know, to make them more friendly. That there's still more to come on that.
Well, I can give you a little bit of preview. They will have more outlets, more power outlets, which to me, I don't care about anything else. More power outlets is fantastic. I think I said the other day that Brian Niccol can make as much money as he wants if he puts more power outlets in Starbucks shops. Yeah. Because I think that's just sort of a common sense thing. And of course, I'm always looking for power outlets anytime I'm at a Starbucks because I'm usually doing some work. Well, no, actually, usually I'm in and out, but like sometimes with not too in frequency, I do some work inside Starbucks shops and stuff. And, you know, it's hard to find outlets most of the time. But they're also, you know, they're going to divide mobile order versus, you know, in-restaurant service. They want to make its espresso-making more of a theater. Lots of uses of the term theater in the restaurant business, which I think is fascinating. But that's probably a good thing, you know, more pickup shelves and comfortable seating. It's just sort of a contrast. The issue, I think, with Starbucks and with a lot of restaurant companies is you make more money with mobile ordering and drive-through and takeout. As one person once told me, you can't make any money by just focusing on the customers that want to spend 2 hours in your coffee shop. There's only so many seats in there. But it's fascinating that, you know, the focus is really on a smaller group of people, but the broad focus is to just make the whole place more friendlier, period. And it's a tough, I think you're kind of like threading a needle there, right? If you can't really ignore those mobile order and drive-through customers, and they're not ignoring them, you know, they want to serve those people faster and make that whole process more orderly and stuff like that. But, you know, so much of the overt focus, the publicity has been about making their coffee shops friendlier. And I think that's actually the right idea. So I don't disagree with you at all.
Well, the thing that's interesting is that you're hearing him literally say some of the same things that Howard Schultz said maybe, 10, 12 years ago. I mean, the same things. It's really just kind of funny how it's coming back. But fundamentally, this is what the restaurant industry overall is dealing with. They built this business, this digital business, because of the pandemic in part, but Starbucks really had started doing this even before then. And they can't lose that business. But then how do they serve restaurants? How do they serve people in a way that, they want to go to restaurants and have an experience? And this is what everybody is trying to figure out how to do. I mean, fundamentally, that's the challenge right now for the industry overall, no matter what
Yeah,
you're doing.
we'll talk about it a little bit later, but like I think actually right now the restaurant business is at a crossroads, and I think that Starbucks is almost in many respects a canary in the coal mine. By the way, Howard Schultz talked about this very loudly 3 years ago when he came in for Kevin Johnson, and then they spent a year and a half with all these listening sessions and focusing on trying to fix this whole problem, and we're still talking about it a couple of years later, and they had to overhaul management to fix it, which in and of itself is fascinating. But anyway, I think that Starbucks is sort of a canary in the coal mine because I think much of the restaurant industry has probably gone a little bit too far to digital and ditching seats and things like that. And I think there is something to the idea, even if customers don't want to go and spend time in your restaurants. And I think McDonald's is a great example of this. Even if the customers do not want to spend time in your restaurants, they still like the whole idea or the concept that your restaurant looks good and is a more welcoming place. And if you remember in 2017, when McDonald's decided we are going to remodel our restaurants. Now, I don't think that McDonald's sort of foresaw what's happening today, maybe to a certain extent. But I think that they remodeled their interior to make it more friendly for in-restaurant customers, even though most of its customers go through the drive-through. But I think that that's sort of helped their overall business because the restaurants just look better. I mean, they're all updated and they're nice and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think the industry is sort of at this crossroads where we spent so much time focusing on the takeout customer after the pandemic that people are starting to say, hey, wait a minute. That's not what I want out of my restaurants. I don't want nothing but digital stuff. And that's where we're at. Speaking of McDonald's, by the way, fascinating change that they made this week. They are creating restaurant experience teams, a restaurant experience team, which is just sort of a horizontal organizational structure where you're getting teams across different functions and stuff like that to work together to speed decision making. What's fascinating about this, Lisa, is that they're creating 3 global teams surrounding specific menu categories: beef, chicken, and beverages/desserts. That to me is fascinating. I think that is sort of bowing to current reality today, which is restaurants are demassified. People do not want your restaurant to be all things for all people. They want it to be specific, and McDonald's has to compete with that. What do you think of this?
Well, okay. I have many thoughts on this, Jonathan. So first of all, what I'm hearing you say is that you've got a burger specialist, right? Mm-hmm. No. Saying that they want to focus on more things to compete with the specialists.
No.
Isn't that what we're talking about here?
No, what they want to is create teams that are just focused on specific menu items. So they're going to have a chicken team that's focused only on chicken and developing chicken and processes and technology, whatever, around the chicken business. And they're going to do that around the beverage business. By the way, I think McDonald's is going to go big into beverages. I've said this publicly. It's all over social media now, but
everybody's going big into beverages. Yeah.
Well, I mean, beverages, you go to get beverages. Like, how many beverages do you drink during the course of a day? You drink a lot more beverages than you eat more food. I mean, that's there's many more potential categories. Anyway, carry on.
But the chicken thing it's what's, I've written about the chicken nuggetification of America. And I think it's really not that. It's going to be the chicken tenderization of America, because now everybody wants to do tenders. And so Chris Kay in his video mentioned specifically KFC, which you pointed out, Jonathan, in your column. It kind of makes you, really, is it KFC? But is it Raising Cane's and Chick-fil-A and Dave's Hot Chicken? And that's probably more who he's thinking about. America wants chicken. There's no getting around that. But and McDonald's wants to compete with those brands that are doing terrifically well. I mean, these are really standout brands right now in their segments. But still, so here you have him saying out loud, they want to compete with the specialists, but yet, again, I go back to my point that what their specialty is, burgers, fries, and shakes. And if they really want to follow that path, I think they should stick with what they do really well, as opposed to, I mean, of course they have to do chicken. We see KFC going into with the new saucy, trying to compete with the Chick-fil-A and the Raising Cane's out there in the world. And it's really there about sauces. So why isn't McDonald's thinking more about that as opposed to, really doing the chicken tender thing and trying to compete with what Raising Cane's does? I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I feel like they should focus on what they do really well. If they're learning anything from this whole world of specialization and specialists doing well, they should take that message away from it as opposed to trying to be more things for more people.
Yeah, I don't think McDonald's could do that though. But chicken is a huge, huge, huge part of McDonald's business. They literally cannot abandon chicken today. If we're talking 40 years ago, you're probably correct. But they have invested decades in chicken. They've got chicken nuggets. They had the McChicken. They now have the McCrispy line. They have had chicken tenders in the past. They took them out of the menu to simplify things during the pandemic. They've had chicken tenders in the past. If you go I went to Singapore last year. They sell all kinds of chicken in Singapore. They sold much more chicken than they did beef. Chicken was very, very, very popular in Singapore, and a lot of other places around the world, they sell chicken. And so this is more of as much a global thing as anything else. So they're big into chicken. They can't really, generally tend to agree with you, but they're kind of who they are right now, which is they're not just a burger concept. They're burgers, they're chicken, they're they're trying to get into beverages. That's another thing. We'll talk about that. This is probably a bigger deal for beverages, in my opinion, because they're already down the road on chicken. But they also breakfast. And an interesting thing is that we didn't hear anything about breakfast, but breakfast is a bigger deal for McDonald's than chicken is.
Yeah.
Or maybe it isn't. I don't know. I don't know their sales results. But anyway, how the chicken sales breaks out quite. But they do sell a lot of chicken. They can't actually get rid of. They can't just say, all right, we're going to focus on burgers. No.
Well, on the specialist thing, though, another point is that, here you have companies like Noodles who are specialists in pasta. And one of the criticisms of Noodles has been that the menu's too limited. So, yeah. It's a risk, the choice of going into specialties. And I remember back when Raising Cane's was much smaller. Todd Graves has made this part of his whole story. This is his shtick. People said no one's going to want a chicken finger only concept. And he proved that wrong. And he's built this company, which is going gangbusters, on doing one thing, really three things. They've chicken tenders, fries, slaw, Texas toast. That's it. Sauce. Great sauce. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about seeing McDonald's trying to compete on that level. I just feel like they should focus on what they do well, or perhaps, you never see like seasoned fries. Why don't they do seasoned fries at McDonald's?
They do.
Do they?
They do. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You just don't see them much in the U.S.
Yeah. Oh, well.
For whatever reason. But they've had, you can go, you got shaker fries. They do them all over. They had, in Singapore, they had seaweed shaker fries, which were some of the best things I've ever tried. They're really, really good. In Canada, they've got some types. So I would imagine at some point they bring it. They've had garlic fries in the United States. So they have done seasoned fries. But, what I want to point out is Noodles, first off, Noodles is called Noodles. It's called Noodles.
Right.
And that's part of it. Part of the limitation is their name, but they're just not really all that in that as a company. And they get a tiny fraction of McDonald's. The problem with the argument, Lisa, to me, is that McDonald's is way too big and they can't actually abandon chicken. It's way too big to be able to just say, all right, we're going to focus on burgers, fries, and shakes. And I guess breakfast, that would probably be problematic. And chicken, it's worth pointing out, chicken is the best-selling protein in the United States. It's where the consumer is at. So you mentioned Noodles. What are they doing to the menu?
They're doing more noodles. So they've overhauled the menu. Drew Madsen came in and, really had a challenge to redo it. And what I really like about this story and this effort is that he's really focusing on the food. And I mean, it's surprising how often in the restaurant business, people don't really focus on, the quality of the food. And here they brought in the Culinary Edge, which is a terrific company when it comes to menu redesign. And they've brought in, they're really leaning into mac and cheese. Now, of course, so they have Scott Davis as the chief concept officer there, and he's a former Panera guy. And, Panera was once known for its mac and cheese. And they really felt that their consumers wanted that. So they've got, I think, 4 varieties now of mac and cheese. They're putting pulled pork on it. They're putting, crispy chicken and bacon on it. They're leaning into proteins. That's what people want. They want more protein. They're kind of getting rid of the more healthfully positioned anti-carb pastas like the zoodles and the lean guini that they had. Those are being phased out because, what people want now is protein. And they had one new salad, and they're, not really sure how salads are going to fit in this whole thing, but, that's not something that they're really going to go into. They've got a new side for an attachment opportunity, which is a lemon broccoli that actually sounds really good. And a few more noodles. And, that's what they feel like they just want to make the food better. And they really feel like they can do that with this new menu, and there's more to come. So we'll see how people accept it.
More mac and cheese. I'm not against it. I'm not against more mac and cheese. Mac and cheese is a really good foundation to play with. It is probably their most, I imagine it's their most popular product is their mac and cheese. And people, it's sort of a social media darling. You can do all kinds of stuff with mac and cheese. I make pulled pork mac and cheese, Lisa, but my pulled pork is probably better than the pulled pork that they're going to do it. Not going to lie.
Home smoked, I might point out.
Yeah, yes. I smoke my pulled pork at home. I'm not saying my mac and cheese is better than theirs is. I'm just saying that my pulled pork probably is. But pulled pork mac and cheese. You can do French onion mac and cheese. You can do the options are endless. It's a really good thing to do, and why not? That's who we are. They're Noodles. This is a specialist type era that we are in. Yeah. So more power to them. You are who we are in this business, and again, McDonald's is one of the rare exceptions, but for the most part, you've got to focus on what got you here. And, that's what Starbucks is doing. They're focusing more intently on coffee. So they got rid of energy drinks and stuff like that. And they're just leaning into coffee. Chili's, when, their 2024 was spurred in part by saying, all right, we're focusing on a small number of core items, and one of them being burgers. And so they've thrived with that. And so you kind of are who you are in this business. And, and so doing noodles, probably better. They shouldn't do chicken sandwiches, in my opinion. It's not
what salads, really.
Yeah,
unless it's an attachment, which is what they're thinking of.
An attached salad. Salad goes well with noodles. I periodically have a salad with noodles and stuff like that. So superb. Okay, coming up next on The Week in Restaurants, Joe Guszkowski talks about robots, and Lisa and I will give you a preview on a big series we got coming up in restaurant business. But first, our esteemed podcast specialist is going to send you a message about something.
Keep up with what's happening in the restaurant industry with Restaurant Daily.
I'm NRN Managing Editor Leanne Zinsmeister.
I'm RB Managing Editor Heather Lally.
We bring you a specific look of what's happening in the restaurant world from brands like McDonald's, single unit mom and pop shops, and hot button issues like inflation, tariffs, and more.
Start your day right with the Restaurant Daily podcast every weekday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to Tech Check, where I, Joe Guszkowski, talk really fast about one big topic in restaurant tech. This week, can restaurant robots work? Restaurant robotics hit a setback recently. Colonel, the highly automated vegan concept founded by Steve Ells, has shut down and is rebranding as a sandwich place with no robots. Colonel COO told Restaurant Business that Colonel's menu lacked broad appeal and that the company wanted to be less robotic. And there were signs that the robot itself may have had some problems. Ells told the New York Times last year that automating restaurants was, quote, wickedly complicated. The situation shows why restaurant robots haven't quite gone mainstream yet. Kitchen work is delicate and fast-paced, which makes it very difficult to automate. On top of that, consumers aren't all that crazy about robots making their food. Just 30% said they'd be interested in a restaurant where a robot does the cooking. Put all that together and you start to see why Kernel didn't work, but it doesn't mean it never will. Look at Sweetgreen, for instance. The salad chain has had success with its robot, a conveyor belt style machine. It says the robot has helped lower costs and boost sales by improving throughput. 90% of customers say they've had a good experience with it, and Sweetgreen plans to build more of them. That means restaurant automation is going to look a little more like Sweetgreen than Kernel, at least for now.
All right, Lisa. So I don't know if you know this, but it's been 5 years since the pandemic.
What pandemic?
Yeah, do you remember that? It was a pandemic. It was all the rage a few years ago. And it had some really significant changes in the restaurant business. I think, but it's probably not as different as you think it is. I mean, I think we kind of hinted at it before, right? I mean, this idea that, the restaurant business went dramatically towards takeout and delivery, right? And carry out, whatever you want to call it. And, in fact, more than 70% of all traffic now is for off premises. That's up like 8 points compared with 2019. Delivery has more than doubled. Everything has increased, but now we sort of see that what the concept of a restaurant is, in some respects, it's just kind of lost. And I think that we're seeing the effect of that. People really do want a connection, even if they're spending all their time eating in their car.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, no, it's funny. I remember sitting at our dinner table talking about delivery after the pandemic and saying, who would pay $5 extra to have the food delivered when you can just go get it? And I'm just being baffled, by the people willing to pay more for that. And look what's happened. I mean, it's really become, quite the routine, I think, of a new generation. But now we are seeing restaurants really kind of grappling with still, even 5 years after it. On one hand, you see the industry kind of, I think, having gotten over it a lot. There are a lot of companies that are just going gangbusters, and they've really kind of figured it out and found the right place for their brands. But there are other companies that are still, and we're seeing the bankruptcies, all the bankruptcies that we've seen over the past year or so have cited the impact of the recovery of the pandemic. And fundamentally, they could keep going for a while, but in the end, they couldn't make it. And so, we're seeing both sides of it, and that it's still definitely having an impact, but there's still people who have moved past it. And I think, arguably, other than the off-premise, the biggest impact has been labor. And that's something that restaurants are still grappling with. It really has changed the math. In opening a restaurant, when you think about how much you should spend on labor, because of the pandemic, that has changed. It really is a much higher number, I think, for most brands.
Yeah. Restaurants today spend more on labor than they did before the pandemic. But by the way, the labor that they have is, they actually don't employ as many people on a per revenue basis. So if you compare this past July with July of 2020, the average revenue per employee in the restaurant business, total restaurant, not just change, is up 46%, which is well beyond inflation. Because every single day, I get a rant about this. Every single time I compare restaurant sales today with restaurant sales in 2019, somebody says, well, it's all just price, not traffic. No, it isn't. It's not. The restaurant business is generating more sales over traffic. Where those sales are coming from, where those sales are going is very different today than it was 5 years ago. But the restaurant industry is bigger in every way, shape, or form than it was in 2019. That's what the data says. And the employees are actually more efficient. A lot of that is because we're doing more takeout, which tends to be a little bit more efficient. Mobile ordering is more popular, things like that, yada, yada, yada. But, in some respects, they've learned to do more with less, more with fewer employees. Or maybe their employees are more productive. We're seeing reports that they're employing fewer teenagers, for instance. Technology is definitely playing a role. You got to obviously they're not just mobile ordering, but, robotics, I guess.
Well, everybody's looking for a way to cut back on their labor costs, but that's because, the labor is costing more. So the wages are higher overall, which is forcing restaurants to sort of think about how they can create efficiencies using technology or cutting back on, whatever they have to cut back on to use fewer people. And this is something that we're going to hear going forward now, I think, permanently, because wages are going to keep going up. You've written, though, Jonathan, about the industry cutting jobs. I mean, for the most part, the NRA has said in its most recent State of the Industry report that we're pretty much back to, full employment as much as the restaurant industry has employment. So, that's recovered. The landscape looks much better. And there are people who make the argument that things like no taxes on tips will bring more people back to the industry. So, I mean, I have mixed feelings about that, but that could be true as well. So it's not like people are having as much trouble recruiting people. They're having trouble retaining them, but they always did. So, I mean, that's always been true about the industry. And what we've really seen is a lot of companies really build in much more strategic career paths within their companies, which is something that I think that will make a real difference for people. I mean, when you've got Chipotle advertising the fact that you can, start as a crew member and within 3 years be earning six figures, that is a pretty impactful message, I think, for people out there. Mm-hmm. I hope it is anyway.
Yeah. But the issue with restaurants, Lisa, is it's a tough job.
Yeah.
And it's a really tough job. And you are working nights, you're working weekends. If you get into management, you're working 6-7 days a week. A lot of times, you don't get as much time off. So, one of the things I was talking to Victor Fernandez at Black Box recently, and he was telling me that, the turnover among managers is still higher than it was before the pandemic. That actually is not, where turnover among the lower ranked workers is actually better than it was before the pandemic, which is probably a sign of how much money, the rank and file is getting, because they're getting a lot more money. They have less incentive to leave. Because, pay rates are definitely better for the rank and file. So there's less incentive for them to leave their jobs. But, when you get to the management level, and a lot of times those are people that are experienced, they have options and things like that. So they're leaving their jobs. And, that's, still an issue. So at the end of the day, restaurants remain a tough place to work. And anyway, the series starts on Sunday. We'll run all week. We've got all sorts of cool stuff coming up on restaurantbusinessonline.com. Thank you, Lisa, for joining me again this week. And that should do it for the Week in Restaurants, which was edited, as always, by Spoons. Artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on our website at restaurantbusinessonline.com, but please subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm Jonathan Mays, the host and editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening.